Hey guys, today's video we're gonna pound in a friggin' thumbtack with a little bit of a sledgehammer. So I'm gonna show you something really cool called the Decorator design pattern. And I'm gonna show you that using an example that really is not big enough for the power of the design principle that I'm using here. So my first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of explain what I'm doing. So I'm supposing that I'm in a situation where I have a class that's basically doing what I want it to do, but there's like a couple of additions that I might want to make to that class that are going to make it behave pretty differently. And the issue is I might have like 4 or 5 of those additions that I might want to add to my class. And if I make 4 or 5 subclasses, that's all kind of fine. But if I want to say allow 2 of the additions at a time, then pretty quickly I'm running into the like, well, if I'm making subclasses, then there's like 5 basic subclasses that all implement one of those improvements or additions, and then there's actually 5 times 4 that might implement 2 of them. And if I'm allowing 3, then we'd have to do 5 times 4 times 3, and pretty quickly we end up with a factorial, which is kind of a friggin' nightmare. We don't really want to write that many classes because we'd just be copy and pasting a lot. So there's this thing called a decorator design, and that's what I'm going to build today. I'm going to build it something that's a little bit too simple. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to try to build this all in one file so you can see it at one time. I think it might just barely fit on the screen, but we'll see. So our first thing we want to make is I want to make an interface. And the interface that I want to, interface needs to be lowercase. Okay, and the interface that I want to make, I'm going to call text. So for me, the base thing I'm going to do is I'm going to output some text. And then the additions I'm going to do are I'm going to add bolding and italicizing to it. And then I'm going to show you how we can make regular text, bold italic text, and that'll be kind of the best I'm going to get out of this. I'm hopeful that you'll be able to see how we could add some more stuff to this pretty quickly. My interface then is just going to be a simple text interface. So the only thing I'm saying in my interface is that we need to have a string returning method that's called render. And that's it. So all my interface does is say anything that's called text is going to have a render method. Okay, next, I'm going to make a class, and I'm going to make a plain text class. So we're going to call this guy plain text, and that's going to implement our text interface. Okay, and then in here, we're just going to have a private variable that's going to be a string, that's going to be what the text actually is that we want to deal with. And then we're going to make a public method that's going to be our constructor. So that's our plain text. This is going to expect a string that we're going to call text when it comes in. And then we're going to go ahead and do this.text is text. So we're going to take the text that's passed by the constructor and attach it to the class. And then we're going to, I'm going to do kind of a shitty space thing here because I'm trying to get this all to fit on one screen. Then I'm going to make a public method that's going to be returning a string that's going to be called render. That's that render method that I'm required to implement because this implements an interface. And for render, all we're going to do for plain text is we're just going to return the text we already have. Okay, so this guy is basically a wrapper for a string, right? There's nothing else there. This is actually kind of a dumb thing to do. But again, I'm trying to pound a thumbtack in with a sledgehammer, and holding on to that thumbtack's a little hard. So next, I'm going to make a class that I'm going to call the bold decorator. Okay, and my bold decorator is going to implement also that text interface. And then this guy's going to have a text variable on the inside of it. Oops. So we're going to have a private variable that's going to be a text type variable. And I'm going to call that thing, what should we call this? We could call it inner because it's inside of the decorator. We could call it the thing that's, or we could call it wrapped because it's the thing that we're wrapping this decorator around. I'm going to just call this contents. But there's options here. And then I'm going to make a constructor. So we're going to do a public bold decorator constructor that's going to take a text variable that I'm going to call contents. And we're going to attach it. So we're going to do this.contents is contents. So that's just attaching the whatever text implementing thing we've passed along. So that's probably going to be one of our plain text objects, but doesn't have to be. And then we're going to see what's whining. And it's whining because I have to implement render. So we need a public method that's going to return a string that's going to be called render. And for this one, I'm actually going to use a little bit of a trick. So in order to get text, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an escape character. So if you don't know escape characters, these are ANSI escape characters. That's ANSI escape characters. I'll put a link in the comments when I'm done with this that will take you to some explanation about this. But essentially, there's an escape string, so that's /033, and that's our escape character. So that's saying, look, the thing that comes after this is going to be something about the way the console works, not just characters that should be outputted. And then we put a bracket, and then I'm going to put 1M in there. So that's the escape sequence that makes bold. And then we're going to do contents dot render. So we're going to call the render method on the contents. And then we're going to add, and then we're going to make another one of these escape guys. So this one we're just going to go back. So the 0 goes back to plain text, essentially. So this one turns bold on, then we do the rendering, then we go back to plain text. Okay, and now we're going to make another one of these. So I'm going to essentially just copy this guy. Dang it, I ran out of space. I was really hoping this would all fit. I'm just going to nuke some space out of the way here. And I'm going to scoot this down a little bit, just so you can see all of it at once. So I'm getting an error because I've named this thing twice. So I'm going to call this the italic decorator, and I'm going to have to change the constructor name. But otherwise, we're going to leave our constructor method working exactly the same way. Our render is going to work exactly the same way, except here I'm going to put a 3 instead. So that's the ANSI escape character for making italics. And so now we can see our design structure. So our design that I've got is I've got an interface called text, and then I've got 3 things that are themselves implementing the text interface. So I've got a plain text, I've got a bold decorator, and I've got an italic decorator. The plain text is going to be kind of the base thing that I make, and then the decorators I'm going to attach to the outside. So let me show you how that's going to work. So I guess I was overly worried about space. I'm not going to get to see it all, but that's okay. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a text type thing, right? So that's something that implements the text interface. And I'm going to call this one, I'm going to call this guy plain. And plain is going to be a new plain text object that's going to say, this is plain text. period and a semicolon. Oop, crap. I did it dumb. Okay, next thing. I'm going to make another text type object that I'm going to call bold, which is going to be a new... Oh, I forgot. Here I wanted to do bold decorator made from a new plain text that is itself going to say this is bold text. Okay, so the way this is working is we're making a plain text object that says this is bold text, and then we're feeding that plain text object into the bold decorator. So now that ought to be a bold piece of plain text, which makes it bold text, right? So let's output these. So let's do plain.render. And I'm going to need to system println this. So system out println plain.render, and we'll need to close a parenthesis. And then I'm going to grab println here, and I'm going to do bold.render. And then I'm going to hit run on this, and we should see that we got plain text and bold text, even though the bold text is fundamentally at its bottom a plain text thing. So this seems fairly straightforward. This doesn't seem like I've really done anything kind of new or interesting. So let me make bold italic text. Okay, so I'm going to make this text italic is a new italic decorator done to our bold text. So this is feeding this bold text, right, into the italic decorator. So now it's decorated with italics. And now we should be able to do this again. Okay, let's run this and see what happens. So you'll notice that I just got regular ass bold text here because I did something silly. I forgot to change this variable to italic, so that's just rendering bold text again. So even though I used the bold text to build the italic object, it didn't actually change it. So now here I've got my last line. That italic text is rendering as bold and italic. The reason it's registering as italic is that I made it using the italic decorator, and the reason it's rendering as bold is because it's still got the bold decorator on it. So this lets me just keep adding layers. So if I had, say, 10 or 12 different kinds of text, and I just wanted it to, I wanted to be able to pick which of those 10 or 12 are applied, I can go ahead and just wrap them in the appropriate decorators and not in the other ones, and it'll apply all the effects. Hope this has been helpful. You might think of some uses for this. You guys pretty often get notifications on your phone. In fact, you heard my phone go off a minute ago. A decent thing that you might do is wrap some kind of a notifier, right? So you might have a notifier that does like a regular SMS message. You might have another notifier that does like some kind of a social media DM, or you might have another notifier that does like an email or something, or another notifier that uses an automated service to make a phone call. Based on what the user checks in their preferences, you can then make a class for them that's just decorated with the appropriate things. And then when you call notify, just like here we're calling render, the notification would just do the ones that it knows to do. Hope that's helpful. You could use it for multi-classing if you're making a video game, right? You can use a decorator to make something both a warrior and a cleric, as opposed to just being a warrior or a cleric. So there's uses for this. This is a cool thing that you can do. We also use it fairly often for like logging things. So like as you're making your game for production, right? You're gonna want to be able to capture the errors or capture the like background issues that might happen, um, and then look at those logs for when a user has an issue. So wrapping things with logging decorators is a really really common use. We might have a decorator that just takes whatever should have been going to the console, collects it, and jams it into a text file or something. Hope this has been clear. I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.